Darling in the Franxx will probably always be controversial to a degree. Personally, I think I'm of a fairly normal opinion, but for different reasons than I've seen from those online who agree with me. Okay, so obviously, there's mechas, there's waifus, there's legs, there's mecha waifus. Our characters live in a post-apocalyptic world under a strict order of government, and they basically have sex to pilot the waifu bots. The first 8 episodes are a slow burn with building atmosphere, which I honestly found somewhat boring until I picked up on what I felt like they were obviously trying to do. Episodes 9 through 19 and much of 20 I absolutely loved. It's very atmospheric with something like Orwellian vibes, supported by an often chilling OST. There was a definite reference to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the novella on which Blade Runner was based. But I want to talk about some of my favorite scenes and the relativity to some admittedly obvious symbolism. So we've got Hero. Get it? Hero? He's the natural-born boy wonder who sets in motion the children regaining a sense of individuality inside of the walled garden through their names, many of which are also in reference to some symbolic meaning. But if you want in-depth analysis of the characters, I suggest you check out Man Mode's much lengthier video. I prefer not to just repeat too much of what's already been said there. 02 is this feminine beast who only the hero boy wonder will ever be able to tame, and Ichigo is the actual chosen leader when Hero can't get it up with normal girls. Then you've got Goro, Zorome, Miku, Mitsuru, Kokoro, Utoshe, and Ikuno.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian?
In episode 8, one of my personal favorites, the Klaxosaurus spits some magic acid that only melts girls' clothes, and the boys just don't say anything and continue fighting, which might I say might have saved them. Still, I get it. Anyways, it's clearly just a simple scenario used by the writers to set up a new type of character drama, to be acted upon by mostly said side characters. Primarily, Miku is furious and works to make sure the girls are persuaded that the guys have done something unforgivable and should be exiled from the girls' chosen half of the residents in the plantation. The females use pressure from a place of sexuality, therefore the males decide to take ownership of procuring food and eating it instead of providing it. It's almost as if the traits of evolutionary biology are re-emerging through hormone-filled teenagers in the frame of a purely rational world. Breaking news, men and women are somewhat different, especially at extremes, and studies of recent attempts to equalize social inputs turns out to increase the offset enemy to feminists everywhere. Men climbing hazardous oil rigs instead of women. When all socio-political and geopolitical inputs are flattened, biology, trait behavior, and etc. are what remains. Links below if you're actually interested in the studies I was able to find, but my point is not a political one. It is only to say that this is part of the sort of scenario we're looking at. The adults and children alike are forbidden from knowledge of procreation, really any sexual acts whatsoever. All they know is they're pilots, they happen to be paired across to the opposite sex, and they exist to fight for Papa and therefore remain worthy of shelter and Papa's favor. They even pray to this dude. That's all their lives were supposed to be before Hero gave them names, and Dr. Franxx became curious enough to allow the water to be mucked a bit in the case of this special group. Of course, Hero and 02 are mostly completely outside of this situation, seeing it as unnecessary and in 02's case just plain boring. And the obvious reason is because Hero is supposed to be the questions man, the natural leader. He and his already trial-worn heroine living in the walled garden. They thought it through. They figured out instantly that fighting each other over nothing in a world where all they do is fight is a waste of time. That's not to say that I find the side characters uninteresting or annoying. They represent the more normalized, dramatic personality types, and it was clearly established that they are the only children who were treated with the freedom of thought that they had, most children being raised strictly under the collective, purely rational-minded wannabe utopian government. The drama and the sex is just all the nonsense that comes outside of purely rational science for the sake of only survival and progression. These people have thrown out all of the unnecessary menial tasks and ideas that can simply be automated so that they may just live. That's exactly what we get a look at in the episode where Zorome gets lost in the city. Marriages are upheld for simple convenience, and pleasures are derived from artificial stimulus. Classic symptoms of living in a dystopian novella. If it's like the one it's clearly referencing, it's the sort that would have multiple settings to reward different mood settings at different levels. The opposite of all this just happens to be manifesting itself through mostly sexual traits. Juvenile, curious adolescence, which makes sense since they're obviously going through puberty. It's the interactions within this somewhat Orwellian post-apocalyptic world state which is mobilized in order to defeat the last remaining enemy to the state between our darlings who are so unrational that they lean in favor of the dramatic most of the time, and the strictly deeply material rationalist adults that made these episodes so interesting to me. A world state that has existed for at least a full generation, has altered aging but become infertile, and has begun mostly living in these protected golden cities which of course resemble paradise. It's been this way a while. So in this chick's all, I want to physically have a baby. The common man of this time and setting is all, whoa, wait, what? We don't do that. These emotive responses and behaviors simply wouldn't have been predicted anymore. So this is clearly supposed to be a bit of a surreal social experiment carried out by the ongoing plot, and that is what I felt made this show so special for the first 20 or so episodes. And then episode 20 finishes up and the slow-burning human grounding of what I loved about this show is uprooted completely. Turns out some random aliens which are never referenced until now were working behind the scenes. And while it must be said that humans ultimately made the decision to abandon their human all-too-human individuality, the pressure that created much of the drama is immediately pushed onto those aliens. The aliens are the ultimate extreme of the purely rational world state. It's thematically relevant. I understand, but what it is not is good writing, and 4 more episodes hinge on the back of this. I'll admit that Man Mode's breakdown of some of these scenes, primarily the wedding scene, increased my perception of some of them. Once again, I think it's a great supplement for understanding the show and what it did accomplish. But perhaps the greatest disappointment is that when Alien Space War arc quickly comes to a close outside of forces at work in the background again, the show attempts to quickly go back to its grounded themes, but it reads like the characters got a peek at the script. The subtitles read like an ad for a self-help book at this point. And as some would say, it's not real when you can clearly see that the characters do in fact know exactly what the writers are trying to say. All ambiguity and interpretation is lost, and that feeling of witnessing a theoretical narrative with only subtle contrivances is gone. In this case, you immediately get to listen to an episode and a half of this cheesy, hot-off-the-first-draft antithesis to the original setting's atmosphere, which was acted out slowly, naturally, and physically. It's simply not a satisfying conclusion to me to what I once thought would be 24 straight episodes of this world just sort of unfolding. I understand that all character preconceptions in a sense have been uprooted by this event, but this gave me whiplash and was completely unnecessary. Are there no stragglers, no difficulties adjusting psychologically, no more interesting banter highlighting the harsh dichotomy between the adults and the children's frame of reference? The other species just retreats underground again like, whatever. So look, I'm sure I carry some bias. I'm happy to know that many of you thoroughly enjoyed the entire show, but the show deserves so much better. It deserved a satisfying natural conclusion that didn't inflate your sensitivity to the next contrived 4 episodes before its conclusion. Then there's the case of Dr. Franxx and the atheist excuse for lack of morals and inhibitions within science. Now this I must say is just a theory, but is well within line with the show's themes. I think it's fair to assume what atheist really means here is Dr. Franxx doesn't believe in anything. He doesn't believe in hierarchies of values, and therefore does not believe that there could be any true conceptualization of a hardline philosophy of ethics. It seems clear to me that we are to naturally assume that this in fact had a helping hand in turning this world to a world state that represents rationality versus meaning, science versus values. Truly one of the age-old questions of the world, and certainly one we have not stopped asking. Upon rewatch, I will say, I love this strange shot of the adult referenced earlier, staring in awe of the boy she met taking such unreasonable risks to guard her entirely meaningless home and existence. I love the thorough presence of all juvenile drama juxtaposing the bland, boring technical bureaucracy and rationality in the first 19.5 episodes. There is solid continuity throughout. We've learned the explanations as to why 02 didn't want a new name, we know why the lesbian was always just silently staring at Ichigo, we can observe the prevalence of Nana's emotions slowly re-emerging up until her breaking point in front of Kokoro. I love how much of this show feels like a theoretical social experiment handled mostly through grounded science fiction. But in spite of the unique sexual themes, I feel they dropped the ball whereas many shows before did not. And I cannot ignore that entirely. By the way, if you liked Darling's fan service and you like Ichigo, go check out my AMV style supercut of only scenes primarily based around Ichigo's legs, featuring ZZ Top. It'll make you go, wow, I guess this exists. Let me know what you think.